iZombie Season 2, Episode 4, Even Cowgirls Get the Black and Blues. Now, the first thing I want to talk about for this episode is that there was not a single vision in this episode. And I thought that was something that was very interesting about it because it seemed like in this season they've been doing some pretty interesting stuff as far as the different cases, and mostly it's been like the brains that Liv has been on and how it's just like they've been really freaking hilarious. But I think in this episode they did something very different where we heard about the visions because in one of the cases Liv mentions like, oh, you know, you asked her to do this for you because she wanted it in advance and she said no. And so while you're trying to like cheat on your wife, she said no, and that's why she threw the coffee on you. So she definitely had the vision, but we never got to see that vision. And I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but I feel like it was because this case, ultimately, you know, when it ended, this case had nothing to do with the answer. And I feel like that's why they did that, because this was an episode where the visions didn't mean as much as the ending because the visions didn't help solve the crime. There was no crime for them to actually solve. It had to do with the case that we heard in the beginning of the episode, which I knew was going to come into play. I didn't think that's how it was going to play out. I just figured they would do like, you know, sort of two separate cases, or, you know, it might come into play a little bit where like the gun may have been used by someone else, like, you know, the guy who robbed the store, you know, he dropped it, and then maybe the gun would have been used by someone else, and they would have been the one to kill the woman, or something like that. Like, I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to play out, and then just going through the episodes, like, okay, well, they have the scene where the kids find the gun in the beginning, and then, you know, after that, it's like, oh, we hear about the robbery on the news in the background, so it's like, alright, well, that's happening, but they're talking about this case of this dead woman who was choked to death. And so, you know, it goes through, we get all these different things, and then they have sort of they kind of play around with the idea of the ex-boyfriend who was in prison, and it's like, okay, his buddy actually lied about his alibi because his friend was getting a ticket, and we see him at the bar, and he's like, I don't go to the bars and stuff anymore. And he walks up to Liv, but they have just a normal conversation. He doesn't like knock her out or freak out or anything like that about the relationship, or even the song, like, oh, that's something that, you know, she actually wrote before, or anything like that. It was just a normal thing, like, I really enjoyed your song, and I think she would have as well. And he's actually just genuinely heartbroken, and he just enjoyed Liv's song. And I kind of just like that idea. Like, it was something that was very interesting about the episode, where we didn't need the visions because we weren't getting the answers that mattered. Even if we'd seen them, it didn't actually affect anything. Ultimately, when it came down to it, it really was the girl just happened to live in a place, you know, the wrong place at the wrong time, and when she found the guy in her closet, he killed her. And that was it. There were no true answers for the case that Liv and Clive were actually looking for that made any difference. And I feel like that's why we didn't see any visions this episode. And I love that idea. I think it was such a cool concept because we don't, you know, obviously when we get the visions, it's like, oh, you know, check this out. This is an answer that, you know, does this or does that. But we got no visions. I doubt they'll do it again because it would kind of make it seem a little obvious. And I guess in a sense it was because they had the other case. But like I said, I really thought that something else was going to come out of that case. I didn't think it would just be, oh, you know, they have to... It just ends up being that bank robber, or I think he robbed like a grocery store, you know, this thief ended up killing this woman, and all the answers, all the work that they did ultimately meant nothing, including the visions. It was just, that's how it played out. Ultimately, if anything from the case, the main thing that happened, the main component from that, was Liv going to see Major and her talking about letting him go. And then, of course, we got the ending scene, which ended very differently than I think we all might have expected, because I thought for sure that they would be making out and they would do like pretty much every TV show on Earth would normally do. It pans over and it's like, oh, this is your roommate who I totally did this morning. And they didn't do that. I was very surprised by the ending. Like, me and my girlfriend were both watching it, and we were both shocked. It was like, we both really thought that it would end where they see her and then it's like Major kind of puts the connections together, like, holy crap, they know what's going on because she's living, with Liv. And I just thought that was interesting, just the way they ended that. So that was another little shocking thing where I was like, huh, they totally could have just done the normal thing, which admittedly I wouldn't have hated, even if they did, even if it's super cliche and generic, where it's like, oh, the characters make out, and then it's like, during the make out is when they get the big reveal. I wouldn't have cared. I would have been like, it's still awesome that she found out, because that when that does happen, which I think we all know it's going to, when it does happen, it's going to lead to something really big. But I was very shocked that it didn't happen at the end of this episode. It was still a crazy ending because Liv and Major are just making out. Like, obviously, neither of them can really get over the other. And they still can't exactly be together because it's Major, even before the whole Utopium thing, it just wasn't working for him. It's like, the whole zombie stuff is happening. Obviously, him having to deal with all the kids being killed off and just getting beat every episode, basically. Just every time he was in an encounter with someone that was a bad guy, he got destroyed, which, if anyone has ever gotten the most revenge, it has to be Major. Like, any revenge in a TV show or movie, anything ever, it's like Major and probably Max Payne, if you guys have played that game. Basically, Max Payne is kind of like Punisher, where his wife and children were killed, or wife and kid were killed, and then Max Payne, just like the Punisher, goes on a rampage and kills all the villains. Major is kind of like that, except he didn't lose anyone. He just himself got beat up, and then he kind of returned the favor. And he was kind of, losing all the kids, so he kind of got the most revenge. And like, the most, I should go back and watch that finale, because that was such an amazing scene when he was going through there, and it was just like insane. But anyway, to get to back to the actual episode, it was very interesting to watch, them go back and forth, in these last couple of scenes with Liv and Major, where it's like, she lets him go. He's ultimately like, okay, thanks for stopping by. And it was like nothing to him. He just, okay, closed the door, and, he was done. But at the end, it's like, when he ran into that kid, and it kind of made him relive pretty much everything that happened in the last season. Like, he was living this normal life, working at the shelter, and then he got fired because of all the insanity with the Candyman, and obviously Blaine, and everything going on there. And he gets to this really, really low point where he's being forced to kill off these people. Even if they're zombies, they're living their normal lives. So he's forced to kill these people off. And now he's just in a crazy situation, and he runs into the kid, and is like, holy crap, that was finally his moment where he was just like, this isn't me. And so he needs help from Liv, and it's still going to be a process, I'm sure. Just because they've made out before, not going to make a difference. I'm looking forward to this process, because it should be very interesting. But I enjoyed this episode. I love the main case, for sure. I love the way that they played around with that idea of not giving us any of the visions. I definitely enjoyed Major's stuff. Blaine's stuff was pretty interesting. His stuff was actually really funny, like them dealing with this former drug dealer who turns to God and stuff. I'm so confused as to why they didn't just kill the guy. But I guess at the same time, the whole vision thing isn't exactly like rocket science, where it's just like, oh, we can figure this out. I don't know why I use rocket science as an example, so I don't have to like turn this up because it's getting cloudy outside. But it was interesting. Like, they had to turn the guy into a zombie, kicked him out, and somehow that's, it's going to turn him again, where it's like, he doesn't, because of course he doesn't want to kill people, and he doesn't even want to, cut the drugs for them anymore. So it should be interesting to see how all of that plays out, because ultimately, as far as I see it, he's just going to succumb to being a zombie, or he really won't, and he'll turn into a brain-dead zombie, and I don't think that's going to work for them. And I'm sure that's not how it's going to play out. I'm sure he will end up going back to playing like, I need brains, because this is insane. I have this crazy hunger that I can't get over. So of course Blaine is gonna get his answer, but I was just thinking like, I'm surprised he didn't just eat the guy. Like, honestly, eat the dude and then look at some Utopium. I would assume you'd just be like, oh, there it is. That's how he cut the Utopium. Like, all it is triggers. So you need Utopium. You know, you need him to cut the Utopium a certain way. Just look at the Utopium and that should kind of trigger it. You would think that would trigger it. Or maybe talk to the guy that found him, because I'm assuming, because Blaine has the guy where it's like, I know who cut the Utopium. You would think if he ate the guy's brains and just looked at him, he'd be like, okay, I remember that night too. But that is not how it played out at all. So we'll see what happens. I don't really know what to expect, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. I did enjoy this episode, of course, like I said. Love the idea of zero visions because it didn't actually matter in the end. I think that was just a really cool concept for them. And it was just something that I wasn't expecting. I was like, it's weird that we aren't getting any visions. And then when they got to the end, I was like, now it all makes sense because we didn't need the visions because they didn't matter. They didn't give us any true answers. So I like that idea. I really like the major stuff. I don't know how this is going to play out at the end officially, but it was sort of a resolve for Liv, but at the same time it wasn't, because obviously they made out at the end, so she didn't really let him go. But we'll see. It was definitely an enjoyable episode. I really loved it, of course. I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And I want to know if you guys liked what they did with the zero visions for this episode. I want to know for sure if you guys thought the same way that I did, because as soon as it got to the end and it was like, oh, the guy that robbed the store was the one that killed her, as soon as they said that, I was like, that's why we didn't get any visions the entire episode. I knew it as soon as it happened. That was why we didn't get visions. So I would love to know if you guys kind of got the same thing as soon as you heard it, or if you thought that from the very beginning maybe. You know, you knew the answer, like, oh, this person's going to be the one that killed the woman for some random reason. He was in a closet or whatever. He was hiding it. If you know, you figured it out. Because for me, I was trying to figure it out, like, okay, well, they have these two cases. You know, like I said, I just wasn't sure. I figured it would be resolved in the episode, but then at the same time, it was like, it could be something that goes beyond just this episode. It could be something where it's just introduced and then it goes way beyond that. At first, I thought the kids were going to find a dead body. They found the gun. I thought they were going to find a body. And then, you know, the kid, like, shoots the gun off and, you know, we get the opening. I was like, okay, well, maybe the kids are going to get arrested. And then some other, like, I thought it was going to be, like, a totally different storyline. I wasn't sure. But I definitely want to know what you guys thought. So please comment below, let me know. And thanks for watching.